Alright, so for years I have wanted to make a full-scale, accurate, ultra heavyweight, regardless of cost, regardless of impracticality. Just wanted to have a real Buster sword. Now, nobody has commissioned me for this project. This is a totally self-funded and self-motivated build, basically. To build an accurate Buster sword, I'm using a full 1-inch thick Hardox brand AR500 plate. A huge chunk of it weighs over 150 pounds. I haven't actually weighed it yet. Now, somewhere along the way, I remembered that AR500 is used for steel targets, and 1-inch thick AR500 is obnoxious for that purpose. It is essentially, I hate to use the word bulletproof, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're just going to use 50 BMG, that's 50 caliber Browning machine gun. It's pretty much the largest thing you can get, within reason, of course. I'm going to send this thing over to Matt at DemolitionRanch, and he's going to take a shot at this with his massive firearms collection. I really can't wait to see how the sword does. I think it'll hold up to just about anything he has. I think the most extreme armor-piercing rounds may give this thing a little run for its money. Secondarily, this thing is going to be insanely heavy. I don't think I have a prayer of lifting it. I don't think anybody I know has a prayer of wielding it. So we're going to get a top 10 world's strongest man to lift this thing and hopefully swing it. I have no idea what's going to happen. Robert Oberst finished 9th place in last year's World's Strongest Man competition. He is 6'8" and I think around 375 pounds. He also holds the American log press record. He has pressed a log weighing 465 pounds overhead, which is well over double what I can do. So I have pretty high hopes for this one. Needless to say, this is the real deal. We're going for the full 1-inch thick Buster sword. This bad boy weighed in at 157 pounds. Obviously, hopefully it weighs less once we actually get this trimmed down, but I kind of cramped up my abs a little bit trying to just carry this thing. By the way, don't ask me what a 1-inch thick chunk of hard ass cost. It ain't cheap. Well, that was just a little bit of work. I think it took about an hour to make that cut. This thing is like a good 20 pounds, I would say. Not really the greatest start. I started with this angle grinder and it got so hot that I couldn't hold it even with the welding gloves. I switched to my highest end angle grinder and I think I destroyed it. It just started sounding funny and now it had basically no power. So I finished the cut with this one and I think we're sending this to the graveyard. I can smell it from here. So one of the first things I'm going to have to do with this bad boy is I'm going to have to machine off the ends, or the side basically. You can see this is a flame cut finish. This was done with an oxyacetylene torch. Most likely it looks like all the sides were done with this. Now you can see from the discoloration of the steel that this got really hot and it likely ruined the temper of the steel right at the very edge. I actually did a whole video on this. I'm basically going to have to remove a very small amount of steel all along the edge just to kind of get that annealed steel or softened steel or tempered steel off the edge so I can have the hardest steel available for the edge of the sword. I'll also want to clean it up just to have a nice straight lines and then lined up parallel to each other and so forth. Interestingly enough, I was just measuring it with these calipers and whoever cut this did an amazing job. Using just a torch, they cut it. It's within 2 thousandths of an inch over the length of 4 feet or so. Actually a little bit longer than that. 0.02 of an inch is less than half a human hair, and to maintain that width over the course of this giant piece of steel is really impressive. Alright, once again, we've got the workpiece hanging out the door over here. It is about 25 degrees out or so, so I've installed this vinyl strip curtain basically you'd see in a walk-in freezer or something like that. Actually helps a surprising amount, even right now with the pretty sizable gap in there. It's noticeably better. What we're doing over here is we're just going to take a 1/4 inch off this whole edge. I don't have any nice smooth flat surfaces to reference off of, so I just kind of eyeballed it. I'm actually eyeballing it on this side and lined it up with the slots in the table pretty well. It's within a tiny fraction of an inch, and then once I do one side I'll be able to use that surface to reference to make the other side parallel. Going to be quite a bit of material to be removing, so it's probably going to take 45 minutes just to make one pass down the side here. Maybe I'll add in some time lapses for you guys. Alright, so I've got one nice flat machine surface here. The machine range of motion is about 32 inches, so you can see right in here is where the cut stopped. Now, to make sure that the continuation of the cut is straight and parallel with this, I'm using this guy. This is a dial indicator. Every notch, let's see if I can get it without the glare, every notch is 1/1000th of an inch. So as I traverse the table back and forth, I can see if it's, you know, this piece is slightly angled, and just tap it in with the hammer and then tighten down these clamps. Let me put you on a tripod here and I'll demonstrate really quickly. Alright, hopefully you can see that pretty well. I've got it set at 0. I'm just gonna traverse the table. Not too bad. Looks like about 0.02 of an inch over maybe 2.5 feet. I would say that's pretty damn close. So we've got all the edges machined pretty nicely here. We just got to go with the end. Now the only reason I want this end perpendicular to the sides, you know, as perfectly as I can get it, is because when I'm attaching the guard, I want a surface to reference off of so that the guard is basically perfectly perpendicular to the blade, and that'll help me align the handle as well, because then the handle can be perpendicular to this surface. So I'm just going to skim it. I'm not going to take a ton of material off, but to make this parallel, this is the best I could do. I've got this right angle here, and I'm using this surface to indicate off of, because the blade itself is all rough and kind of uneven. This is relatively straight and flat. Obviously, it's not a precision tool, but this is close enough. I've got this right up against this machine surface here. So I should be pretty close to 90 degrees on this surface. That's good enough for the girls I go out with. pretty damn good. So as mentioned, the machine only has a range of motion of about 32 degrees, so I had to reposition the blade multiple times in order to make these long passes. I'm just checking this out. Yeah, I can see it right there. Not too bad. You can just see the littlest bump. I can just feel that. Can't really see it too well from above. Just a tiny bit. That's not more than, I would say, 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch. Alright, so we're all set up here. You can see barely, I've got a line here. This is actually going to be the edge of the bevel. It's going to be full 3 inches of bevel and a 1/2 inch deep. So just going to use this cutter. I've had great luck with it. And I'm going to just knock off this corner so I can start using larger and larger cutters. I've got my machine set at 9 degrees exactly. That's the angle of the bevel. And let's just get to it. I'm not really sure how this is going to go, but we can at least remove as much material as possible. Alright, as you can see, we've knocked that corner down, taken about maybe an inch, about an inch or so, maybe an inch and a half. I don't really remember. I just wanted to knock down the corner so I could use one of these guys. Now this is a 2-inch cutter. It's got 5 replaceable teeth on it. You can see they're held in with screws. And each of these teeth can actually be rotated around 180 degrees and it'll have a new edge. In fact, yeah, here we go. You can see I actually broke this tooth previously and then I rotated it around. Same thing with that one. After a certain amount of usage, they just kind of start to break up more or less. So I've got a fresh side of the teeth on here, and let's see if we can take a 2-inch pass. Alright, so final step, I've got this big 3-inch cutter loaded into the machine. This is the one we were just using. This is a 2-inch cutter. 3 inches is really too much for this machine, but I'm just going to take a real light pass and just finish this bevel. You can see the overlap of the cuts here, and you can see I haven't quite made this distance. I probably have about 40 thousandths of an inch of depth to take off this whole thing. It's about a millimeter, so hopefully the machine can handle this, but I guess there's only one way to find out, right? Well, that turned out pretty nicely. A nice smooth finish here. It's just time to get the rest of this done. Gotta move the workpiece and then do this part and then do the other side. A few more days of work. Mildly interesting side note here. I've just finished this entire long bevel, and the last cut I made was this section. Now I had chipped some of the teeth in this cutter, so I had just replaced them. And you can clearly see the difference between a slightly dull cutter. You can really see that circular pattern in there. And then right here is where I changed it. It's almost a mirror finish. And I don't know how well you can see it. I just put, yeah. That should give you a pretty good idea of how good the finish is. Not bad, huh? Just from some new teeth. Alright, so we are working on the second side of the bevel now, as you can see. Now, I had some issues with the larger cutters. I'm just using this as an example, but you can see this entire tooth is a cutting edge. It's about 1/2 inch deep, but due to the rigidity of this machine, or lack thereof, I really couldn't take very deep cuts, so I was only using the very bottom corner of the cutter and wearing out the teeth prematurely. I was just chipping them all off. Here, I'll show you. Alright, you can see here the lower right corner and upper left corner are just chipped off, so it's just getting very expensive. So hopefully with a smaller diameter cutter like this, I can take a full depth cut, almost the entire length of this, and that'll wear it out evenly. Hopefully anyway, and given that this is a smaller diameter, the machine will require less rigidity to make this cut versus, you know, a wide cut. It's just couldn't handle it. We're gonna give this a shot. Obviously it's gonna take a lot of passes, but at the same time each pass will be full depth, so I just need to keep stepping over, you know, 1/4 inch at a time till I get to the 3-inch mark here. You know, after doing all this cutting, I've got these chips everywhere, piles of them, and I can't even close the damn door. Getting a little ridiculous. Alright, so we've got this massive 3-inch bevel completely done on both sides. Next step is to just do the little bevel on the tip there. Basically just kind of like that, extending out to the tip. I'm going to do that manually just because I would have to prop this entire blade up at a compound angle to work with the angle of the milling machine, and it would just be such a huge pain. This thing is so long and so heavy that it would just, getting it at the right angle, clamping it down, and not having it fall and break my feet is the main concern here. So I'm just going to do it by hand. It's only a small section. I'll probably cut out the majority chunk of it and then just do the rest with an angle grinder. Let's get this bad boy off this table and onto my welding table though. You know, with this bevel cutout, it got quite a bit lighter, but still very heavy. I would say probably pulled 20 pounds out of this thing. I'll have to weigh it when I get a chance. Alright, so as you can hopefully see here, I have left a little bit of meat on the edge here. Can't really get it to focus. It's not much, about a 32nd of an inch. I think I measured it at exactly 28 thousandths of an inch. A little less than a millimeter basically. I just wanted to leave as much material on the edge. When I sharpen this, it's going to be like a compound angle, a rounded convex compound angle, just to leave much material so that when you're hitting things with this huge amount of mass, it's not going to just chip the edge. Hopefully it'll kind of hold up. It'll be like basically like a giant axe, more or less. I mean, it's not like you're going to swing this thing through some water bottles or something like that. This thing is just for mass destruction, basically. Or display only. I'm guessing most people won't even be able to lift it, so it is what it is. Alright, let's see what we got here. $113.4. We started this blank, before I did anything to it, was 157 pounds. So we've actually taken 44 pounds off of it. And I still got the 2 material holes to do, and then the bevel at the other end. So it's looking pretty promising. Okay, so full disclosure, I've marked out the shape of the bevel here. This is basically what it's going to look like. And it's going to meet here in the center line of the sword. Now, if you look at this, this is going to look a little funny, because especially towards the tip here, there's going to be kind of a weird angle. If you think about it, the bevel is going to have to go like this, like a really sharp angle right here. And then as it passes down, it'll have to kind of get shallower and shallower and shallower until it's about 9.5 degrees down here. It's going to look a little silly right on the tip of the sword here, but I don't think there's any real way around it. Ideally, the whole tip of the sword would taper this way. It would get thinner and thinner and thinner. And that way, when this bevel meets up with it, it would end, you know, in a point from all directions. But given that this sword is going to weigh, I don't know, 125 pounds or so, at least 50 kilos. Actually, it's like almost 60 kilos. I don't really want to have this thin, tiny little tip on the thing. It's just going to break off immediately. I mean, sure, in the video game world with exotic materials and CGI, it's fine, but this is, I really don't want to break this thing off, you know, the first time somebody hits something with the tip. At the same time, who could even do that in the first place? I'm not really sure. Again, not the greatest cutting sword. It needs to be built for durability in the real world, unfortunately. At the same time, I also want it to look correct, so I think this is the best compromise between function, aesthetics, and accuracy. Hopefully.